You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome on into another McGuire Monday. I'm Julie Stewart-binks, joined by, of course, Pierre McGuire. It's been a hot minute since we've been able to chat on a Monday morning. Pierre, you are coming from a different location today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Julie. Nice to visit with you. I'm from Bluffton, South Carolina, where my wife and I are moving into our new home here. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, a new beginning for you and a moving process that I don't wish upon anyone and anywhere in life because it is very difficult, but you're at the tail end of it, as you mentioned. So we're very happy for you in that regard. Yeah. Okay, well, speaking of players
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it.
Yeah, people that might be also moving, like you at this point, lots of players that are with trades and different things going on with them. Let's take a look at the Leafs in the offseason right now, which we are very much in. And there's been a lot of reports sort of around general manager Brad Treliving and what he might be doing with the contracts of David Kampf and Calle Jarnkrok. Both are very affordable contracts. Kampf is 2.4 AAV and Jarnkrok is a 2.1 AAV. There have also been links with potentially being in like a trade package with a defenseman. Is there anything you've heard specifically about what these players' futures might be and if any of this is true?
I've heard that Kampf and Jarnkrok are definitely on the market. I also heard the Leafs have interest in Erik Karlsson, just like the Detroit Red Wings have interest with Erik Karlsson. What I found interesting with what Brad Treliving's done so far, Julie, signing Travis Boyd. He's a kid that played, obviously drafted out of the University of Minnesota, played for the Washington Capitals, been around the league a little bit, but he's a hockey sense player. Signing Michael Pezzetta away from the Montreal Canadiens and trading away Ryan Reeves to San Jose, bringing in a kid like Benoit Gru, bringing in Jacob Quillen, Luke Hames. These are younger players, but they're guys that have the ability to play in the NHL. So I see a lot happening for Toronto right now. I think Brad Treliving, like a few other general managers in the league, is setting things up so that they can make some more additions as the offseason goes along.
Right. So potentially they're making their first move in the chess game, and then like that could lead to something else, or maybe these guys end up staying for the long haul. When we look at the void that has been left by Mitch Marner, that everyone has really been kind of keying in on and sort of realizing, oh my gosh, like 100-point plus player is now not on our team anymore after his sign and trade with Vegas. Toronto roughly has around $5 million in cap space, and they've been eyeing UFA Jack Roslovic and is sort of a top candidate for the top 9 really at this point. But Brian Rust has also been mentioned. Would you prioritize signing sort of, I guess you could say like a low risk signing like a Jack Roslovic, or do you think maybe there's a more impactful trade acquisition that could be made out there, but you might have to sacrifice a draft pick or something you don't want to give away?
I think that at this point, when you bring up the name Brian Rust, and I already talked about Erik Karlsson, I could see where Pittsburgh and Toronto, because of sense of familiarity, obviously Kyle Dubas, Brad Treliving, Toronto connections, Kyle knows their roster. I think Brad knows a lot about Pittsburgh's players as well. The Rust situation with Karlsson would be very interesting for Toronto. Brian Rust is not intimidated playing with star players. He can play as a depth player too. Imagine if you had Nick Roy, Bobby McMahon, and let's just say Brian Rust is your third line. That's significant firepower. That's really good. And that's not to take anything away from Jack Roslovic, by the way, who's really good friends with Austin Matthews. They played together in the U.S. National Team Development Program. I see all that. But if you were to ask me who's a better player, Brian Rust is a better player than Jack Roslovic.
And how much would you think you'd have to give up for someone like Brian Rust?
Well, the market's different. I think this is going to be more of a significant trade where it's not just Brian Rust. I think you're going to have to give up young players. You probably have to give up a draft pick. You may have to give up an established player. Pittsburgh knows they're not in a very good position right now. They're trying to build for the future. They're not worried about the past anymore in Pittsburgh. That legacy's already been created. Stanley Cup in 09, Stanley Cup in 16, Stanley Cup in 17. They're worried about what's going to happen in the future, not what happened in the past. So all those guys are left over, except for maybe Crosby and Malkin and Letang. All those other guys, they're going to be moved out, I think.
It's kind of ironic, the names that you mentioned that are still there, that are sort of the biggest names, the core guys that have been a part of all the championships and the success of that team, but they are really at the tail end of their career. Be curious to see what happens with them going forward, and especially with Kyle Dubas sort of offloading, as you mentioned, a lot of different players. He seems to be one of the few general managers that is looking to sell at this point. But when we kind of look back at the Leafs, there's been speculation around Morgan Rielly, and he has a AAV of $7.5 million a year. There, of course, we talked about him all year. He got better as the year went on. It seemed like, especially when, remind me, I'm blanking on
Brandon Carlo.
When Carlo came. When they started playing together, he seemed to become more effective than he had been earlier. There's been rumors that, of course, I'm not sure how much weight to put into this, potentially for a straight up swap for Nazem Kadri, because they both have the same sort of contract status. But really in the bigger picture, there's also Devils' Dougie Hamilton. He's got a $9 million AAV. That would be sort of a bigger discussion in the long run. But do you think that the Leafs should sort of stay with the consistency of their blue line, or maybe upgrade it in some way?
Well, you're always looking to upgrade. There's no question. Now, would they use another real good puck mover? The answer is probably yes. Now, I know a lot of people are kind of poo-pooing the Henry Thrun acquisition for Ryan Reeves. I watched Henry Thrun play for St. Mark's in Southborough, Massachusetts. I watched him with the National Team Development Program. Watched him play in the World Junior in 2021. They won a gold medal, Team USA, in Edmonton against Canada, 2-0. And I watched Henry Thrun play at Harvard for a long time. And my son played against him. So I know Henry Thrun's game pretty well. He's a much better player than what's been advertised in the media. I think he's going to surprise people at camp. And playing on more of a puck possession type team, which Toronto is, that only helps a player like Henry Thrun. He's a great first pass defenseman. Can he be better in terms of stabilizing deep in his own zone? The answer is yes. But I would not throw him out and say, oh, yeah, Henry Thrun was just a throw-in. He's not. He's a much better player than people think, and I think he'll add. But legitimately, could Toronto use one more puck-moving defenseman? The answer is yes, they could.
Okay, so you've probably watched Henry Thrun more than anyone else in the entire world with just what you mentioned right there. That's probably music to the ears of Leafs fans, hearing that he is really high, more highly rated than probably people understand.
Yeah, well, he's 6'2", 205. He's got an NHL body. He's a very good skater. For those that watch St. Mike's play, or not St. Mike's, sorry, that watch Toronto Marlies play, Marshall Rafai was a teammate of Henry Thrun's at Harvard. Marshall Rafai played games for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Henry Thrun is probably the same type of skater as Marshall, and that's an elite skater. Marshall's an elite skater. I think Henry's probably a better puck mover than Marshall. I think Marshall's probably more physically determined than Henry. So there's give and take on both sides, but they're both very good players and good depth players for any organization in the league. And let's remember one other thing. Expansion is coming, Julie.
Yeah.
So you have to stockpile as many players as you can, because you're probably going to lose a couple of them coming up when we have two teams coming in for expansion.
Wow. Yes, that is something very important to keep in mind. I really hadn't thought about that as far ahead yet, but obviously you have to think about it. It's not that far ahead. Okay, so I mentioned two things in that sort of convoluted question, but what do you think about the idea of Nazem Kadri, a guy who was really kind of chased out of Toronto by fans at the end, but him being reunited with the blue and white?
I'd be surprised. And that's not a knock on Naz. I'm a huge Naz fan. I'm so happy for him, obviously winning the Stanley Cup in Colorado and moving on to Calgary. And I didn't like the way it ended for him in Toronto. I'll be honest. I was doing those games when he took the penalties, especially against Boston. I know people were mad at him, but the truth of the matter is he's an aggressive guy. He's a very useful player, vastly underrated for good portions of his career. I just don't. I'll ask you the question. Does he play ahead of Austin Matthews? No. Does he play ahead of John Tavares? No. I don't think he plays ahead of Nick Roy. So, and I don't see him as a number 4 center. So I just don't know where he fits on this team.
Right. That's a great point. And I think it also depends on what these guys end up. It's an interesting conundrum because it's like, well, maybe he does end up playing like on that second line if Tavares doesn't have the kind of year he had, coming into like how he just had. We know that was an incredible year that he had, but that's also a big risk to take for the amount of money that it would probably cost with the trade involved and in your cap space. Okay, so also back to some significant cash would be Dougie Hamilton. Is there a universe where you could see him playing back in his hometown?
What's cool about Dougie, and I've known the player a long time and the person a long time, and the person is fantastic and the player is very good. I didn't like the way things were handled in Boston when he got moved out of there. I think a couple of older players didn't want him around and he kind of got pushed out, which is unfortunate. But he's a very good player, excellent one-time shooter on the power play, very good first pass defender. A little like Henry Thrun, big NHL body, needs to get a little bit better down low coverage. But when he gets angry, he's very good at that. So you got to find a way to keep him angry all the time. But I just don't know that dollar value is high. I remember when Dougie signed in New Jersey, I said, it's kind of like going into a store. When you break something, you buy it. When you give that contract out, more times than not, you're not moving that contract unless you're eating some of the money. I don't know if there's an appetite in Jersey to eat some of that money.
Right. Yeah. And he is a player that they would probably want to keep on their roster to be able to bolster their team. And I think I can beat you on that one, Pierre, as knowing him longer, because he was friends with my brother when they were like 2 or 3 years old. So Dougie and Freddie used to be at my house playing as kids, which is really funny because my dad rode with Doug Hamilton when they were like younger, because they were on the same sort of rowing team, I guess, that was supposed to compete in 1980, but Canada pulled out. And then my dad retired because my grandma was like, you have to get a job. You can't be just like a rower forever. And then, but Doug Hamilton went on to compete in 1984. And this is just a little bit of an aside, but I found it fascinating. I talked to my dad about it last summer because I was like, well, that would have been really difficult, I imagine, watching like, the team that you were on go to the Olympics, compete in it. And he said it was really difficult, but they came fifth and they were all so happy for them. Like my dad was ecstatic. Everyone was like, wow, you guys went to the Olympics, you came fifth. And then they came back and they were so disappointed that they came fifth. They never talked about the Olympics again. And it's like, isn't that such a unique, the stakes are so high. You want to win and you want to medal and you come fifth and you're just like, even though it's the most incredible experience that you even got to compete in the Olympics. So that's to say there is that competitive, as we know, the bloodline of the Hamiltons, and his mom was an Olympian as well, I believe, or she was a professional athlete. I forget in what sport. I
think the mom was an Olympian. I think the mother was an Olympian as well.
Yeah. So he comes from Olympians. Just, you guys should procreate because you'll likely have a very, very good athlete, as we know. Okay, so moving back to what we want to talk about, the Leafs. There's, despite the chatter, Elliot Friedman has really sort of tried to control the rumors around Connor McDavid. And the idea of him testing free agency, and he's not going to be doing it anytime soon. He remains under contract, of course, with Edmonton. But that being said, there's a lot of lists that are like, if he was to test free agency, Toronto would be top of the list. Like, we're in the long run, in a series, in the long, big picture, could Toronto ever be a serious contender for Connor McDavid?
Absolutely. If they found out that they were in, that situation where Connor was interested, absolutely. I can see totally why he would consider Toronto. It's a major market. It's amazingly well run. The professionalism of the organization is phenomenal with Keith Pelly there, obviously, and Brad Treliving. And I could see exactly why he'd be interested in coming. That being said, I would think there'd be other suitors too. It wouldn't just be Toronto. But yeah, absolutely. I could see why it would be a likely landing spot for him. But I think it's far from over in Edmonton for him. I still think there's a lot of racetrack left for him to cover. There's a lot of unfinished business in Edmonton for Connor McDavid, for Darnell Nurse, for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, for Leon Draisaitl, for Zach Hyman. People forget that. They've been to the final twice now, and they've been stung twice. And they got embarrassed this year. The last 2 games of that series was embarrassing for the Edmonton Oilers. They know it. Everybody around their team knows it, and they got a lot of unfinished business. I don't think a competitor like Connor goes away quietly into that good night. I think that after they signed Evan Bouchard, I thought that Connor McDavid eventually would re-sign as well. I really believe that. I think it's just taking time to get the numbers right.
Right. And I mean, how much does that play into a guy deciding to stay, especially a competitor like Connor McDavid? Just the idea that you got so close 2 years in a row and you didn't get the ultimate trophy, but you were close. And there's that idea of like, if you were to maybe walk away, there'd be something there for the rest of your life that would just be like you walked away from a very close opportunity to finish something.
I think relationships matter too. I love what you're saying, Julie, because I think the relationships matter too. The pain that Connor felt is the same pain that Leon Draisaitl felt, the same pain that Stuart Skinner felt, the same pain that even Evander Kane, who got traded away, the same pain that Darnell Nurse, all those guys, Nugent Hopkins, Zach Hyman, who I know he's really close. The pain those guys felt had to be unbelievable, especially this year. And I don't want to throw rocks on them when they're down, but the way they went down in games, the last 2 games of that series, that wasn't good. That wasn't good at all. And they got a lot to answer for on that. You can go down like they did last year in 7 games and say, you know what, we came down, we were down 3-0, we came from behind, tied the series up, we eventually lost. This year wasn't the same. They don't have any moral victory in this year. That was not good the way they went out. Not good
right.
at all.
All the games this year in the playoffs were, for the most part, very exciting, except for a couple blowouts. As you mentioned, we saw the Leafs took on a couple of those. A lot of teams took on a couple of those. But like that final game where Florida won the Stanley Cup was over before it was over. Like there was no way they could come back from after Knobloch pulled Skinner or pulled Pickard because was it Skinner or Pickard?
Skinner.
Well, because he changed goalies a couple times. He had that Jake Ottinger situation going on. I'm doing one of those things where I'm love to just like, I'm working through it in my brain as we are on this podcast right now. However, we're going to get back to the Leafs, and a big one is we know that they made changes with Brendan Shanahan and the Leafs mutually agreeing to part ways after 11 years. And, we give credit to the Shanahan plan and the fact that they had more regular season success for the Leafs than they'd had since 1967, really. But it was just about playoffs and about winning. And that is the hump that the Leafs have been trying to get over for many, many years. So when you look at what maybe Shanahan brought to the team or what a team president brings to a team, what are those qualities that Keith Pelly and MLSE would be looking for in someone to, potentially fill that successor role?
I don't think they need anybody right now. I think they're well on their way. I think that Brad Treliving has surrounded himself with good people. Shane Doan being one of those people. I'm a big fan of Shane. I think he's really sensible. He's been involved in major junior hockey as a part owner with the Kamloops Blazers in the Western Hockey League with Jerome McGinley and Mark Recchi. So they understand the inner workings of major junior. His son, Josh Doan, plays pro hockey but did play at Arizona State. So they understand the college component, or he understands the college component of it. So I don't think they really need that position filled right now. I think going out and hiring Mark Leach was a very good hire as a chief amateur scout. I've known Mark for a long time. He's a St. Lawrence guy, and that's where I spent a lot of time coaching before I got to the pros. So there's a lot going on in Toronto that's very positive, and I'm really encouraged. Again, last year, I truly believe this last season, Julie, and I've been telling you that since last September when you and I started working together. I thought the Leafs were a really good team, and I thought they stole Anthony Stolarz. When Stolarz got hurt in the playoff with the Bennett collision, Toronto, there was never the same team in that series. They lost a game 7 at home. They got embarrassed in Game 5 on home ice. They showed a lot of resolve in Game 6 to force a Game 7. But the truth of the matter is that I think Toronto was a much better team than what they ever got credit for. I know the fans were frustrated, and I think the future is very bright for their team still. I really believe that. Okay,
a lot of people will say, well, it won't be as bright as it was because Marner's gone, even though the fact that everyone in Toronto seemed to want to have him gone and that the core four, quote unquote, we're not putting Knies in there, didn't really work out. But I'm just thinking this out loud, but could you say that, with the guys they're talking about that maybe aren't huge stars, they're not 100-point plus guys, that they're almost looking at the model of like not a core four guys, but like a core four lines, like more depth top to bottom all round?
Love what you just said. So let's just use the center ice position right now. Matthews, Tavares, Roy, Ottawa, and Lawton. And even if you keep David Kampf, that's 5 guys down the middle that can all play in the league. You're going to move Willie Nylander up to play with Matthews and Knies to replace Marner. Matias Maccelli is a really good player. I'm telling you, this guy's way undervalued. Way, way, way undervalued. People in Toronto are going to say, oh, I didn't know this guy was this good. His hockey sense is exquisite. His peripheral vision's off the charts. And he really gets the game. And he loves the puck on his stick, but he also loves to make the players around him better. There are not a lot of playmaking wingers in the league that are like him. He's very good. Way undervalued player. And I think they had a lot of inside info. Again, he was an Arizona/Utah player. True Living earned his stripes there before he went to Calgary. They're very familiar with that player. So no, I still think Toronto's on the right path. And if they ever added one more puck-moving D-man, and if they ever added another high-scoring depth forward, they could be really lethal again. They really could be.
Right. Well, it seems as though Brad Treliving is obviously not done yet with stacking his team for the rest of the season. And we've already seen moves happen. We love to hear the word undervalued because that means that a guy is probably going to surpass a lot of our expectations. And this is July 14th right now, and we're still able to talk so much about the Leafs. That means we have so much more to go. And that is because we will have McGuire Mondays coming for you every single Monday for the rest of the offseason into the next season. And Pierre, thank you so much for all your insight and analysis as always, and good luck with the rest of your move.
Oh, you are an amazing teammate, Julie. Thanks a lot. And I hope you had a great trip because you look rested and well. Well done, young lady.
That's an act.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.